in 1989 was a very sad day and a hard incident that changed your life forever. Can you kind of tell us a little bit what happened?
I happened to look on TV and see that the nation's worst oil spill at the time happened in America. I immediately recognized the beaches of Prince William Sound. And to me, it was the day the ocean died, yet something inside of me came to life.
Hamadakyapi, Nick Tilsen, Amachiapi, Chatea, Washtenape, Chuzapalo. This is Nick Tilsen. I am your host for LANDBACK for the People. This LANDBACK podcast is dedicated to the movement, and it's dedicated to the next generation, and it's dedicated to the elders. And on this podcast and this episode in particular, we're going to have an opportunity to talk to one of the warriors and elders of our movement, Dune Lankard, who's Athabaskan, who's Eyak from Cordova, Alaska. And he has been fighting to protect Mother Earth and the ocean and the salmon for since about 1989, if not before. And we will hear war stories from him. We will also hear about the work that he has done historically, but also the work that he's doing now with all things kelp. Seaweed and kelp has the ability to fight climate change, diversify the fishery, and save jobs and feed the people. So on LANDBACK for the People, we're gonna delve into that. It's always been, conservation. The cross intersection of conservation and indigenous people has always been a contentious space, because a lot of times mainstream conservation has left out the role of indigenous people, or has reduced indigenous people just to those who are culture bearers, or just those who are part of what makes this particular conservation project interesting. And now we're at this time, and when we talk about LANDBACK, we are talking about indigenous-led conservation. We're talking about indigenous sovereignty, indigenous self-determination, and so as we talk in this podcast, we're talking this show, we're gonna delve into some of those issues. And Dune Lankard runs an organization called Native Conservancy. He used to run the Eyak Preservation Council. He has waged big wars against corporations who have tried to destroy the Copper River Delta, the Prince William Sound. And just a little bit of family history here is I actually ended up as a teenager in Cordova, Alaska, in Dune Lankard's community. I landed, and 2 days later, or a day later, there was a blockade to block a road across the Copper River Delta. Because this road was opening up this entire Copper River Delta for development, for coal transport, for tourism, for all the things that are to destroy Mother Earth. I was 15 years old and ended up there and got to be a part of this historic blockade that successfully blocked the construction of a road across the Copper River Delta to the point that that road has never been built. As a young man, as a teenager, to be around of a bunch of vibrant activists who were working hard to protect the sacred place and experiencing abundance for one of my first times, to be able to experience this whole concept that the earth can provide everything for you. I got to fish for salmon up there. I got to hunt berries. I actually went deer hunting on Peak Island in the middle of the Prince William Sound. I got to experience all of these different things. And I got to experience a whole bunch of people fighting to protect that. And Dune being one of those people. And so on this episode of Land Back for the People, we are going to hear from Dune. We're going to talk about historic battles, but we're going to talk about current battles in the climate crisis and talk about our journey as Indigenous people to use the Land Back movement to regain our control and regain our power, regain our homelands, to protect them from destruction and to ensure that the future generations have this land forever. So here we go, Land Back for the People, episode 7, coming at you. On this show, we get to have a variety of different warriors that have fought to protect our sacred homelands. And we have one of them here, Dune Lankard, who's Eyak Athabaskan from Alaska, has been fighting to protect his homelands in the Prince William Sound and Copper River Delta for the majority, if not his own whole entire life. And so we're going to dig into it, but I want to give Dune an opportunity. He might not say some of these things, so I'm going to say them. Dune's been around for a long time fighting to protect his homelands. He's waged successful battles of protecting over 1 million acres or more of salmon habitat, of the trees in the forest. He's been lifted up by Time Magazine as one of the heroes of the planet. He was selected by Asoka as one of the world's leading social entrepreneurs, and has won numerous awards for this work. And so, and he has mentored many of us in this movement, just by being a warrior fighting for Mother Earth. And so, I'm one of those people that got to be mentored by Dune and to watch Dune work, and watch Dune fight for Mother Earth. And watching him do that work has influenced both me and the people I work with, and the creation of NDN Collective. And so I just wanted to say that and acknowledge that and give Dune an opportunity to introduce himself before we jump into the questions here.
Sure. My name is Dune Lankard. I'm an Eyak from the Copper River Delta in Prince William Sound, Alaska. And I'm from the Eagle Clan, and my Eyak name is Jamatsuki, which means little bird that screams really loud and won't shut up. So sometimes I've had to live up to that voice and take on the powers that be.
Well, Dune, we're excited to have you on the show. You grew up fishing. And I'll be honest, like my mind was blown when I first went up there as a teenager, of how much you could live off of the land and how much you could do subsistence fishing, like literally do enough subsistence to live to feed your family for a whole year off the land. And so, tell us a little bit about growing up fishing and what was it like through your childhood, and what was that experience like for folks who, maybe have never been to Alaska or been in that sacred space.
I think growing up on the ocean, that our education came from the Copper River Delta and Prince William Sound. Like, yeah, we went to school, but we learned how to live in the Sound and the Delta. And when you're out on the water, you don't want to fall overboard because you could be gone within minutes. Some places out in the wild, you can go 5 minutes from home and get beat up by a bear. So I think that a lot of us grew up with different instincts and abilities to figure out how we're going to survive. And spending as much time as we did, 2-3 months every summer, as soon as school would end, May 15th, we were out on the water till school started in the fall. And so we grew up fishing and catching halibut and salmon and crab and every species in the sea you could think of. And we'd come into, after a rough day of fishing that started at 2:30 in the morning and end at 10, 11 o'clock at night. And we'd come into the cabin and we'd go, seafoods again. And we'd fall asleep for 3-4 hours and we'd go back and do it again. But we're one of the last native fishing families in the Sound and the last families fishing wild salmon. In our time, we grew up chasing wild salmon. And by the late 70s, early 80s, they built 5 of the largest fish hatcheries in the world. So it changed our way of life. But I remember as a young pup seeing the first modern-day sailboat and modern-day kayak come into Prince William Sound. And I knew that was the beginning of the end because we were rediscovered again. And I knew that people would see the bounty and the beauty and the abundance that we grew up with our entire lives.
And wonder for themselves.
Yeah.
Become the takers.
Exactly. And because, like, if you look at the history of Alaska and even our region, we used to be the razor clam capital of the world. They came in and took all the razors out by barge loads. We had 5 species of wild salmon. We had the Pacific herring runs, which numbered 200,000 ton a year. We returning every year. We grew up on this amazing bounty and abundance and fed millions of people around the world, just our family. So imagine all the families, like 250 seine permits, 550 gillnet permits. We fed millions and millions of people around the world. And so I always felt like I was doing my part to be a provider. You know how you grow up.
Not just for your, I mean, that's a huge perspective because it's not just feeding your family. It's not just feeding the people, folks at your kitchen table, but you're actually like thinking about feeding the people globally through your work as one of your contributions.
Exactly. Like on a subsistence level, giving a fish to a friend or a family is like an act of philanthropy. It's giving them something that they don't have to buy in the store. And when our Copper River sockeyes go for $49.99 a pound and our Copper River king salmon go for $79.99 a pound, you want to get it from a friend. You don't want to have to go buy it in the store. But then on a commercial fishing level, we have that abundance. And so I feel like those omegas need to be shared around the world. And so that's what we did. And we grew up in a family that we always had more. So we would do 10 to 15 to even 20 drops to different families in the community just to make sure they had the traditional food from the land and the sea.
Well, it's beautiful. I mean, I had an opportunity to be there as a teenager and experience, I always go back to, I think that's one of the times I experienced abundance for my first time. And I got to experience it at a time when I was like developing my understanding of systems in the world. And because down here, we, as Lakotas in Oceti-Sakowin territory, most of our subsistence lifestyle has been, destroyed through colonization, through the stealing of our land, through the cattle industry, through the buffalo being murdered and removed. And so being able to, go out there and, pick salmon berries and pick berries and get full before you even get to the fishing spot. I remember that was a time for me where I was like, what is happening? I got to the fishing spot and I'm already full because I was eating berries the whole way, and then you get to this river and it's like a whole river full of fish. It blew my mind. So I appreciate having those experiences and, you sharing that part of your journey and part of your story with me. We're going to shift a little bit. In 1989 was a very sad day and a hard incident that changed your life forever. Can you kind of tell us a little bit what happened on the Bly Reef in 1989?
Yeah, Bly Reef is 44 miles as the crow flies from Cordova over near Valdez. And it's called Valdez Narrows, and everyone knows Bly Reef is there. Everyone knows. And when I happened to look on TV and see that the nation's worst oil spill at the time happened in America, I immediately recognized the beaches of Prince William Sound. And to me, it was the day the ocean died, yet something inside of me came to life. And I looked at things from a different perspective. All of a sudden, I was able to be up in the air like an eagle and look over the land and the sea. And we witnessed a fast-moving oil spill moving 70 miles a day, covering 1,500 miles of coastline that was pristine and wild and productive, and saturate our beaches with this crude oil. And the thing about oil spills that people don't realize is once the oil hits the water, the war's over. There's no way you can clean it up, no matter what you do. Exxon came in and dumped carburetor fluid. They call it Corexit, hundreds of thousands of gallons over the oil field that was in the water to sink the oil into the water column. And, you know, as a fisherman, you grow up and you're always around diesel or gas, and sometimes you spill a little bit. Well, you take Joy soap and you dip a little bit of Joy soap on that, and what it does is it sinks that oil. It gets it out of the public view. And so for the oil companies, what it does is it makes it look like it's a smaller oil spill, and they're worried about one thing, and that's saving the money in their bank account. And so if they can, hide the oil from the public eye, then people think it's a smaller spill. But here we are 34 years later, and the number one response to an oil spill in the ocean or the water is dispersants. And so, I felt like everyone was going to come in and help us, that the cavalry was coming, that someone would come in and try and make things right. We won a $5 billion verdict for damages to the people in our way of life. And Exxon appealed that 17 times until they got the Supremes of their dreams in the U.S. courts to not see that justice was served, but just us was served. They just wanted to protect the amount of money paid on punitive damages. They wanted to protect the companies. They certainly didn't want to protect us. So as a fisherman, as a native person, as a person who grew up on the ocean feeding millions of people around the world, for the first time in my life, I felt expendable. I felt like, okay, no one's coming. We're on our own. We have to figure this out. I watched families break apart, suicides, drug and alcohol abuse. I saw people leaving town by the droves. It was a terrifying time because there was bankruptcies. People lost their fishing permits, their boats, their fishing way of life. I felt that our livelihood and our way of life was comparable to none. And I felt that was lessened on that day. And, it woke me up, and I hope it doesn't take an oil spill of that size to wake everyone else up.
Thanks for sharing that. I fished in the Prince William Sound in the late 90s, 97, 98, 99, 2000. And you can still tell that there is oil in the Prince William Sound. You can see it along the shoreline. It's marked forever. And And to think about how many of your people and all of the people around the coast out their traditional way of life, not just a commercial fishing way of life, but their traditional way of life was impacted and destroyed that day. And I couldn't help but also be there and like feel like the sadness in that too, spiritually. And I haven't really ever talked about this before, but just like being a person that being Lakota and being raised up around ceremonies my whole life, you could feel a sadness in the Prince William Sound. And I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. I didn't know what it was like before the oil spill, you know. I'm only 41. I was born in 1982. So right. when the Exxon Valdez oil spill happened, you know, I was 7 years old, and you could feel that sadness in that space, because of the destruction of what used to be there, you know. But I will say that also, like, being young and watching you fight for what is left to make sure that it's not destroyed anymore became a big inspiration to me. Can you talk a little bit about, like, what was the fire that that lit in you after that point in time? As hard as that moment was in 1989 when the oil spill happened, in the years after, you dedicated your life to fighting for Mother Earth and the ocean. Tell me about that sort of transition to go to battle mode in that way.
Yeah. When that spill happened, I realized that no one was coming. I realized that our way of life was impacted negatively for the rest of my life. And I realized too that I had to find a way to be louder than everything else, yet remain a voice of reason so people would listen. So I went out into the wild, and I went out into the forests, and I just, summoned the Eyak ancestors, and I said, just use me as a conduit and speak through me. If there's anything in the history of time, in our time in this region, if you've ever wanted to say anything or you were concerned about anything, now's the time to be heard, because the eyes of the world are upon us. And it created a platform and a venue for our native voices to be heard. And also at the same time, show people that there was a huge inequity, and that if Exxon really was going to make us whole again, now was their opportunity to do that. And so I decided to rise up and find that courage and be bold and be loud and take on the powers that be to preserve and protect my way of life.
Awesome. We're going to jump into what some of those battles were after we take a short break. All right, we're back here, LANDBACK for the people, and I get to ask my favorite question that I tried to remember to ask on every show, but sometimes we get carried away. It's about LANDBACK. Has been like a warrior who's been fighting to protect Mother Earth for as long as you have. When you first started hearing people say like those words together, like LANDBACK as in like a movement. What did you think? How did that resonate with you when you heard like LANDBACK?
When I first heard LANDBACK, I thought about what it meant to me in my whole life, because all I have ever done is try and fight for our land back. When I was a young pup. They founded oil after statehood was in 1959.
Statehood of Alaska.
Of Alaska. Yeah. And then by 1966, they had found oil in Prudhoe Bay. And so they had an Indian problem. How were they going to build an 800-mile pipeline from Prudhoe Bay all the way into Prince William Sound? And so they had to do land claims. And so the oil companies got together and ponied up $500 million. The federal government put $432 million into putting together the Alaska Native Land Claim Settlement Act in 1971. And so we, the Eyak people, were fighting for our land claims, for our land back. We were fighting for our recognition, our sovereignty, our Indian country, our tribal government. And so we were the final village selected in July of 1974, 2.5 years after the Alaska Native Claim Settlement Act passed into law. And so then fast forward when the Exxon Valdez oil spill happens and Native corporations decide to liquidate their assets and clear cut their trees. To me, that was wild salmon habitat. And so I felt like we need to protect this land. We need to get this land back. We need to get control over our land and our rights and our way of life and protect our wild salmon to the best of our abilities. And so that's what I thought about when I heard that.
That's a good answer. We should keep this. We should keep that one forever. The reason I always love asking that question to old school warriors, I mean it in a respectful way, is that land back has always resonated with elders and young people. Like you could always see it on people's face, right? Like when they would say land back, and people would be like, yeah. You could see it, the dots connecting for folks. That's why I've always thought it's such a powerful narrative, because like I never met an Indian who didn't want their land back, you know, but I love that it's always been cross intergenerational. And like we had, you know, one of our elders from this territory, from Oshatishakoe territory, Madonna Thunderhawk. We had her on this show, actually the inaugural episode of this show. And she was at, you know, Alcatraz, Wounded Knee, BIA head takeover, at basically, you know, her claim to fame is she always talks about how she's like the Forrest Gump of the indigenous resistance movement. She was everywhere for the past, you know, 60 years or something. But when you asked her about land back, she was like, yeah, duh, land back. And so I always love that question because there's a power in it. There's a power in the intergenerational of what it invokes in our spirit.
Yeah, I remember this one time I went into this place in Cordova with a lawyer to get a beverage, and I walk in. We sit down. We're not there 30 seconds, and the owner yells, "Hey, Dooner, what do you want besides your land back?"
See, yeah, that's powerful. That's powerful. So yeah, I want you to share one story. To be clear, for the folks that are listening and watching, there's many more battles than one that Dune has been a part of. But I want you to share a battle over protecting land that you were victorious in protecting it, and to conserving it, and for the long haul. So if you can share one story around that, I think it would be inspirational to our audience and to our movement.
I think there's, like you said, there's numerous examples because there's been many battles we've had to take on. One of the biggest ones is definitely saving the Bering River coal field. That'll turn into preserving the lower Copper River Delta. But I'll talk about one spot upriver. It's called Abercrombie Rapids.
I've been there.
And it's where all the mama bears bring their baby bears and teach them how to fish. Because all the males can go pretty much anywhere. There's 25,000 salmon or more going upriver underneath you daily when you're on the river. And so the bears make their living on the river as well. That's where they subsist. And there was a plan by this local native developer to take Abercrombie Rapids and turn it into a bear viewing station with a little cabin and jet boats going up daily and bringing people up. And it was a very sacred, amazing, irreplaceable spot on the Copper River, because not only were the rapids there, so because it was one of the narrowest parts of the river, the rapids, could be 18, 20 feet high or more, right? And so these big mama bears, they get up on these boulders, and some of these boulders are house-sized, right? And so they get up there and they start scooping fish and getting them for their little ones. And so I decided to go down to the local native corporation and top file on the shareholder who had received the Abercrombie Rapids.
What does it mean to top file?
The native corporations set up a process and a system where shareholders could choose land on the Copper River Delta. And so I went in and top filed on top of that same parcel of land. And they said, well, why
So that means that you both were staking claims to it, essentially.
Yeah, it's almost like a gold claims or, it's a land claims, right? And so I've been landing my rafts there for 12 to 15 years, right in that exact spot. And so I felt if anybody deserved that spot, it was the bears, not humans to watch the bears or distract the bears or whatever else. And so I decided to top file. And the fella had 2 years to get a survey in place and and get access to the title of the land. And a couple things come up, and one of them was he didn't have an act of God clause for his insurance policy. And the Childs Glacier had broken loose and created this 30-foot tidal wave that went upriver and went across the river and then came back down the river and took his jet boat off of its anchor line. And it took it underneath the glacier and just pelted it with icebergs and destroyed this, amazing boat. And so he lost that. And then he was distracted, with some other things, and he didn't get his insurance policy or his survey on the property within the 2-year time limit. But because I had top filed for the bears, after that 2 years was up, the Native Corporation called me back and said, Dune, you're now the new owner of the Abercrombie Rapids section of land. And so I felt that the bears had won, that this was their habitat, this was their way of life, and that they deserved it just to be just like that, not having all these jet boats going up and down the Copper and all these tourists and all these people, kind of like the McNeil River, that kind of event. We didn't want to see that on the Copper River, just like, a lot of people have wanted to see wild and scenic river status for the Copper. You don't want that, because then everybody would want to come and love it to death. It's one of those sacred wild places that should be left alone for the bears.
Well, there you have it.
And the salmon.
I love the victorious stories, little, small, and big, when it comes to protecting land, and that brings up like this bigger issue. Like, I'm pretty sure that if you go ask the bears anywhere, they're gonna probably be down with LANDBACK, especially after that story, and it also begs this like bigger question. that like land back and indigenous-led conservation is better for everybody. Land back and indigenous-led conservation is better for Mother Earth. It's better for the advancement of human rights, indigenous people's rights. It's better for the salmon. It's better for biodiversity, and it's better for the bears in this particular case. And I think that a lot of times when people are thinking about land back, a lot of times non-native people, they get scared right away. They're like, oh no, they're going to do the same thing to us that we did to them. And we're screwed if those Indians get their land back. You know, it evokes fear as opposed to opportunity. I mean, we're in a global crisis when it comes to the climate. And we have to derive at solutions. We have to derive at solutions that help increase biodiversity so that we can protect Mother Earth and protect our ability to continue to be here. And so land back is a superior way to be able to protect Mother Earth. Never have I heard the words ocean back until my recent trip back to the Prince William Sound, when I heard you talking about ocean back, and I was like, what? And then, you know, like, I don't know, those of you who don't know Dune, like, he's like a motivator, you know, he gets you all motivated. And he kept talking about kelp. And as a fisherman, I was like, why is he all fired up about kelp and seaweed? I just remember that shit getting in our nets and getting in the way, you know, sinking our nets.
Yeah.
But Dune's over here talking about kelp can help. And it's like, what? The whole world. It can feed the people. It can provide jobs. It can help us with our subsistence way of life. And so I was like, I don't get it. I was like, I need to go to Alaska. And Dune was like, let's go. Let's come up here. And I learned a bunch. But what is this whole craze about kelp? How can kelp help fight climate change? And what is the kelp craze all about? You're hearing it. It's in the news. People are talking about it as a climate solution. What is this whole craze about kelp? Especially for those of us who don't know about how kelp can help.
Kelp is the fastest growing organism on the planet in the right conditions. It's growing 18 to 24 inches a day. It has 14 different vitamins. It has calcium, 10 times more calcium than milk. It has oil. It has water. It's like omegas. I remember this story that my sister Pamela had found in the Cordova Times from like 1909. And it was about this, these couple Eyak gals got off of the boat that came in from the Bering River. And this reporter had seen them carrying something underneath their arm. And he thought it was part of the Bering River coal field. So he chased after them, and when he caught up to them, he saw that what they had was a brick of kelp underneath their arm. And the native women, they called it kelp cakes. And they said, you know, this is energy, because what we do is we cold press it, and we put some hooligan and some salmon berries and blueberries and nagoon berries, and they compress it in these kelp bricks. And so when you go on long travels or long hunts or journeys across the Delta, you're going to want a kelp brick, a kelp cake with you. And so it brings energy. It's a food source. There's 250 or more food recipes that you can make with kelp. They found that it makes an excellent compost and fertilizer, that things grow faster and greener and stronger and require less water. They found that if you take kelp and you add it to animal feed, 2% red seaweed to animal food and feed it to cows and pigs, it reduces our emissions by 60 to 80%. So kelp is like the hemp of the sea. You know, a lot of people call it the sequoia of the sea because it can grow so big and so fast. But it's a miracle organism. You can do so many different things. You can make bioplastics, pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals. You know, you can turn it into clothing. It's really one of those miracle properties that I think if it can help preserve and restore the ocean, and it's regenerative. I remember my dear friend Michael Bezanson, he had said, if it's not regenerative, then just don't do it. And I think that that's where we're at in life now. You got to think about different regenerative economies that are based on restoration and conservation and mitigation.
Let's jump into that for a second. Like how does kelp, how can kelp be used to combat climate change and to mitigate climate change?
What it does is it can help stop erosion when there's a lot of bull kelp that grows along the shore. And so when the bigger surging waves that are happening now with the bigger storms create a lot of erosion. And so that number is going to come down because the erosion, the kelp can be like a line of defense. It helps reduce, the carbon that's in the water. It can sequester carbon 5 to 20 times more than living terrestrial forests. And so the more kelp stays in the water longer, the better it's going to be for the environment, for climate change, for ocean acidification, for ocean rise. And, and I also feel that it's one of the most important habitats in the ocean because there's 200 to 300 juvenile species that depend on that kelp and need to hide in that kelp. And they find their food sources inside of those kelp forests. So it's really important that we protect the last of our wild kelp forests around the world.
Yeah, so those of you who signed up to listen to LANDBACK for the People podcast, I bet you didn't think that we'd be here talking about kelp and that it can help. I ate some of those kelp cakes and they're actually pretty good. And I think that as a fisherman, I was like, never thought I would be eating kelp. But there's so many different ways to eat the food. And so, it's good to eat, but it helps the environment. Also, I the thing I really like about it, as you all are holding on to your subsistence way of life up there, it creates a diversification opportunity. So that you don't have to take all your salmon and sell all of it. You can start diversifying with kelp, and you'll be able to keep your salmon, to eat it as opposed to have to sell it. As we begin to wrap up here, I think it's really important for younger activists and organizers in this movement to hear some advice, to hear some words of encouragement. And there's, people out there that are fighting on the front lines now. People are tired, in the climate crisis. People are tired from fighting in the streets against the police. There's a lot of injustice happening in the world, but there's a pretty vibrant movement of young people fighting today. What's your advice as someone who's been in this movement for, as long as you have? What would be your advice to the next generation of folks coming up behind you?
When I think about when I started out, I figured it out real quickly that you win by going in. You will absolutely lose by sitting in the peanut gallery and doing nothing and being silent and hoping and wishing things are going to be different, because they're not. The reality is the youth are the future. And to me, when you think about it, the youth inherit all the bad decision debt and all the pollution and everything that we've done to the planet, the children in the future are the ones who inherit all that. And I remember growing up with my family, I felt like they gave me things and they gave me opportunities, and I had choices and opportunity beyond belief. But our youth aren't going to have that. They're not going to have those choices and opportunities at their fingertips. And so in the work that I do, what I try to do is inspire them to be as regenerative as possible, be as restorative as possible, help create economies that are based on restoration and conservation, to figure out, how you're going to feed your people, how you're going to grow things from the land, how you're going to grow things from the sea, how are you going to grow climate change resilient species. We need to be not only thinking differently, we need to be acting differently. We need to get ready, because what we're about to face is apocalyptic. Things are changing at a rate and a speed that is undeniable. And so either we get wise or we're going to perish. The herd will be thinned. And I'll tell you this, that what I've seen and what I've learned and I've watched from the Exxon Valdez oil spill, a slow-moving climate change, happening across the land right now, that the comparison is that for us, it was moving like light speed. It was like climate change overnight. Now with everything on fire and flooding around the world, it's a slow-moving climate change or slow-moving oil spill across the land. But we need to adapt and evolve and address and figure out how we're going to live differently on the planet and how we're going to survive on the planet. And I'm worried. I have a 13-year-old daughter, Ananda, and she's a dog sledder. She's a horse jumper. She's an athlete. She filed her first climate change lawsuit when she was 1. She filed her second one when she was 7 with our Children's Trust. They recently won in Montana. So there's hope. There's opportunity. And here's the thing. The day will come that the youth will have their voice and their opportunity to be heard, but they're going to have to do what we did up in Alaska, and that's be louder than everything else, yet remain a voice of reason and do everything you possibly can to protect your way of life as you know it. And that's all I've done. All the things that I've ever done, I've just tried to keep things the same and keep it wild. And this way we'll have something to fight over for in the future. But this is our way of life, and all I've ever done is try and defend it.
So you heard it right here on the LANDBACK podcast. You win by going in. I think I heard him say that. I think since I was about like 13, I didn't know what that meant until I went in. I didn't know what that meant until what it means to go all in, to fight for your land and fight for your people and to sacrifice everything that there is to sacrifice. So I appreciate that, because at one time somebody told me that there's no sidelines in a revolution. You can't be sitting on the sidelines if there's a revolution, because if there's people sitting on the sidelines, there is no revolution. And so I appreciate all of your work. I appreciate all of the influence that you've had on me, that you've had on this movement. I'm sure the Bears appreciate you up there at Abercrombie Rapids. And I think that one of the big things about this movement is we have to recognize that as we are fighting to protect our lands, the bears, the natural environment, we're also creating what the next generation is gonna live through. And we're at this critical moment where we have to be bold, where we absolutely have to be bold. And I think sometimes those of us who think big have to be loud even if we don't want to. You know, fight against these systems that are perpetuating injustice, fighting some of the biggest corporations and some of the biggest colonial governments that have ever been assembled in the history of the world. You know, sometimes they call us radicals. They tried to you know, villainize us, make us seem like we're less than. But I always appreciate being around you, and I always appreciate these stories, because the reality is, like, we are at a time where we have to think big and we have to think bold and we have to be fighting like we're fighting for everything. And struggle is part of it. Tension is part of it. One revolutionary once said that a revolution is not a bed of roses. A revolution is a struggle between the past and the future. Fidel Castro said that. And that could never be more true than right now. Right now, that we are dealing with a struggle between the past and the future. The earth is going to continue on, but the question remains, is our battle to protect Mother Earth, if we win it, are we going to be able to sustain life on this earth for the humans, for the animals, for the plants? And the earth will regenerate itself, and it will clean itself. But we are in a battle to decide how long we're going to be here. And it takes a revolution. And that's what LANDBACK's all about. It's about creating a revolution of change, an opportunity to catalyze radical change so that we have a future as Indigenous people. So I appreciate having you on this show. Thank you, Dune, for all of your work that you have always done for Mother Earth. And we'll look forward to having you back on the show again sometime soon.
Thank you. You know, last thing I'd like to say is that working with NDN, for us, it's land back plus ocean back equals people back, coming back to our homelands. And that's the way it is. So thank you.
Thank you, Dune. All right.